I saved the girl from drowning 17 days ago. 17 mornings now, she stood 30 feet from my front door. Always the same distance, always the same silence. Just there. Her name's Ayanna, Apache. Maybe 15, maybe 20. I can't tell, not with that kind of face that looks carved from something older than years. The first morning, I thought it was coincidence. The second, a quiet thank you. By the fifth, I started counting steps. From my porch to where she stood, 30 feet. From the corral gate to the road, 30 feet. From the feed store in town to the alley wall where she lingered, 30 feet. Every damn time. Like there was a rope between us, pulled tight at 30 feet, invisible but unbreakable. I told myself I was imagining things, but when I stepped toward her, just once, she stepped back. Same pace, same rhythm. One step forward, one step back. I tried it again the next day. Same thing. She watches me like a coyote watches a fire, never blinking, never close enough to burn. It's gotten under my skin. I've tried talking. You okay? Need food? Want to come inside? Nothing. No answer. Not even a blink. She just stands there like a statue carved from dusk and dirt. Mrs. Patterson stopped by with a pie last week, mostly as an excuse to snoop. She saw Ayanna out by the fence line and went pale. "She's not following you," she whispered. "She's guarding something." "Guarding what?" I asked. But she only muttered, "You should have let the river take her." The air's changed since Ayanna showed up. Nights feel thicker. Coyotes cry longer. Even the horses have gotten jittery, eyes wide, breath fogging like they see something I don't. I've started dreaming of water, of hands pulling me down, of staring eyes just under the surface. There's no law against someone standing on public land 30 feet away. Sheriff Knowles even said, "She ain't done a damn thing illegal, Boone. Let it go." But it's not about law. It's about presence, about the weight of a person's eyes who never blinks. This morning, I tried something new. I walked away toward town. She followed, 30 feet behind. I stopped to tie my boot. She stopped. I turned quick, hoping to catch her off guard, but she was already still. I called her name. "Ayanna!" She blinked. First time in days. And then she looked down. At her feet was a single black feather. Perfect. Curved like a question. I didn't sleep that night. The second feather showed up the next morning. Same place, same distance. This time it was white, thin, light, almost delicate against the brittle prairie grass. I picked it up without thinking, turning it between my fingers. Ayanna didn't react. On the third morning, there were two feathers. One black, one white. Both placed in a careful line between us, perfectly spaced, like a counting charm, like a message only she understood. That same morning, she pointed. First time she moved beyond the silent rule. Her arm rose slow, almost reluctant, as if lifting it took more effort than it should. She pointed past me, toward the river, then dropped her hand again and said nothing. The river? Where I pulled her out. It hadn't rained in weeks, and the river was lower now, sluggish and dark, winding like a snake half asleep. I hadn't been back since I'd yanked her from it, choking and limp. But something in that point, it wasn't casual. It was an invitation or a challenge.
So I went. She stayed 30 feet behind, of course. Always. The riverbank looked normal at first, but then I saw it. Just beyond the reeds, in a patch of wet silt, a spiral. Not natural, not chance. A deliberate spiral of smooth river stones, each one placed with care, curling inward toward the deepest part of the current. It was beautiful and unsettling. I crouched beside it, tracing the swirl with my eyes, and then I heard it, bare feet behind me, closer than they should be. I turned, and Ayana was standing just 6 feet away. No fear in her face. No expression at all. Just calm, like she was finally where she was supposed to be. She stepped past me. Kneeling at the spiral, she reached out and touched the center stone. "You saved wrong person," she said. The words hit like a rifle crack. Not loud, but sharp. I stared at her, throat dry. "What do you mean?" But she didn't answer. She stepped back, slow and sure, until she reached the boundary again, 30 feet. Then she sat cross-legged in the grass and resumed her silent watch. I didn't move for a long time, just sat by the spiral, staring at the stones, wondering how a rescue could go wrong. I kept seeing that moment, her hand on the center stone, her words, "You saved wrong person." What the hell does that mean? Who was I supposed to save? And what happened to them if I didn't? That night, there were 3 feathers. One black, one white, and one mottled brown, stacked in my windowsill. And Ayana, still 30 feet away in the dark, watching. Always watching.
They stopped talking when I walked into town. One by one, heads turned, conversations halted, and people stepped aside like I carried some invisible plague. I wasn't Boon Delaney the rancher anymore. I was the one she follows. At the general store, old Henrik Larson muttered something to himself and made the sign of the cross. At the post office, Miss Ellery fumbled her sorting and wouldn't meet my eyes. It wasn't until I reached the feed store that someone finally said it out loud. Mrs. Patterson. Again. She was waiting near the sacks of grain like she'd been hoping I'd come by. "She's marked you," she said. Her voice was soft, like she was offering condolences. "Ain't no shame in trying to do good, but sometimes good ain't welcome." "She's not doing anything wrong," I said. Mrs. Patterson gave me a long look. "She's not doing anything, Boone. That's the problem. Things don't sit still like that unless they're waiting for something. Or someone." Henrik joined us, cradling a bag of oats like a shield. "She brings drought, or sickness, or ghosts. You ever wonder why the dogs don't bark at her?" I hadn't, but now that he said it, I realized he was right. Not one bark in 17 days, not even from the mean strays down by the saloon. "She ain't cursed," I said. But I didn't believe it fully. Not anymore. They said she was a spirit, a marker, a tether, something left behind when a ritual got interrupted. The old stories started creeping out, drawn like moths to flame. Henrik spat. "My pa told me once, Apache don't mourn the same way we do. They reckon death has a path and you don't block it. Someone dies, you let him go. You interrupt that path." He shook his head. "You bind yourself to it." I clenched my fists. "I pulled her out of a river. That's not a crime." "No, but maybe she wasn't the one supposed to come back." That stuck with me all the way home. Ayana was there, same as always, 30 feet from the gate, feathers arranged on the fence rail like a growing shrine. That night I sat on the porch with my rifle across my lap. I didn't sleep, just watched her, watching me. And then, near dawn, she turned. For the first time, she turned and walked away. She didn't go far, maybe 200 yards uphill, then paused by the edge of the old mining trail. She looked back once, just once, then walked up into the hills. I followed. Not right away. I gave her a head start, but I couldn't ignore it, the pull. The town saw her as omen, curse, but my gut said she was pointing the way. That old trail hadn't been used in decades. Dust swallowed the tracks, but I followed her footprints, small and bare, into the brush. She was waiting up there, by a splintered signpost and a half-rotted fence. Beyond it stood an old shack, half collapsed. On the door, scratched deep with something sharp, were these words: Maria Santos, 1847. She was supposed to drown. My breath caught in my throat. Ayana didn't say a word. She just looked at me, and then at the door. And suddenly, I wasn't afraid of her anymore. I was afraid of what my family had done.
The cabin door groaned as I pushed it open, revealing a room barely holding itself together. Dust lay thick as memory. Cobwebs stitched every corner. And there, scratched into the wooden table with something jagged and bitter, was the name again: Maria Santos. Ayana stepped inside behind me. No 30-foot rule, no hesitation. It felt like the air itself bent to allow it, like this place suspended the rules. She moved with a purpose, barefoot across the warped floorboards, to a stone-ringed well sunken into the far corner of the room. Most would have missed it. It looked like part of the foundation. But she knew. She knelt beside it, laid a hand on the stones and said, she begged to die. The river would have taken her clean. Pain gone, name gone. That's the old way. I watched her, pulse thudding in my ears. But your grandfather stopped her. Ezra Delaney, big man with red hands. He pulled her out. I took a step back, ice crawling up my spine. He never told that story. Ayana nodded, solemn. Of course not. You don't brag about breaking a spirit's path. She stood and faced me. Her eyes didn't hold anger, just a calm, crushing truth. She drowned by choice, by custom. She gave herself to the river to erase grief. But Ezra, Ayana's lips tightened. He made her live, alone, bound to pain. I stumbled back, staring at the well. Why this well? It's where she waited, for years, for the current to call her again. But the river won't take a stolen spirit twice. It remembers. I looked down into the well. It was dry. Bones lay at the bottom. Human. Small. A child's. No, I whispered. Ayana didn't flinch. Maria had a daughter. The grief deepened. The river was cheated, so it took something else. My stomach turned. You're saying my grandfather's rescue caused this? She nodded once. He thought he saved her, but he passed a curse down bloodlines. Now your name echoes where hers once did. I sat hard on a broken chair. The world tilted sideways. Everything I'd believed about my family, about good deeds and heroism, was ash in my mouth. Ayana knelt beside me, soft voice cutting deep. You're not wicked, Boon. You were born into imbalance. I looked at her, tears burning hot behind my eyes. "So what do I do?" She stood and walked toward the door. The boundary was back, 30 feet as soon as she stepped outside. But before she crossed it, she said, "You make the scales even again." And then she walked into the fog. That night, the wind screamed across the hills. I dreamed of the river, but this time, I wasn't the one pulling someone out. I was the one beneath.
They came with torches. Henrik, Sheriff Knowles, the preacher's boy, even old Mrs. Patterson, holding a lantern like she meant to chase spirits herself. They gathered outside my gate just after sundown, shadows long and their voices low. I saw Ayanna already standing in her usual spot, 30 feet from the porch, eyes calm but unblinking as the crowd formed behind her. "She brought this," Henrik said. "Sickness in the water, animals dropping dead, cattle miscarrying. This all started when she came." She came because I brought her," I said, stepping off the porch, rifle slung but uncocked. "She didn't ask for rescue. I gave it." "She's cursed," someone muttered. "She's marking him," said another. "No," Mrs. Patterson whispered. "She's trying to unmark him. That's the difference." That quieted them for a second. I looked over at her, surprised. She gave me a hard nod, like someone who didn't want to be right. Then Ayanna did something she hadn't done since the day by the river. She stepped forward, crossed the boundary. The entire mob took a step back as if she carried fire in her hands. She stood beside me. Not in front, not behind, beside. "I have answer," she said, voice soft but clear. "Equal rescue. That is the only way to erase debt. Rescue must be real, risk must be true, or balance stays broken." "And what the hell does that mean?" Henrik snapped. "It means," I said, "we're going back to the river." The crowd stirred. "You expect us to believe some ritual mumbo-jumbo? You'd rather keep chasing ghosts?" I asked. "Let the girl speak. Let us try. Or live with whatever this is eating your fields and your cattle." The sheriff raised a hand, voice tired. "What exactly do you propose?" Ayanna turned to him. "At dawn, by the spiral. Witnesses, feathers, water. One enters current, one chooses when to follow. That is the trial." Henrik snorted. "So you want him to let her drown this time?" "No," Ayanna said simply. "I want to know if he's willing to wait or willing to save with no reward." The crowd shifted again, unsure now. Superstition was easier to hate until it sounded like something sacred. Sheriff Knowles sighed. "Fine, you get your ritual. Dawn, but if this brings more trouble..." He didn't finish the sentence, didn't need to. That night, Ayanna sat by the porch instead of across the field. Not 30 feet, not 3, just near. I sat beside her, didn't speak, neither did she. But we both knew it was coming. Not a curse, not a haunting, a reckoning. And maybe something more than that. The sun hadn't yet breached the horizon when we arrived at the river. Mist clung to the low ground like breath not yet exhaled. The gathered townsfolk stood on the bank, quiet, uneasy. No one carried torches this time. Just folded arms, tense jaws, waiting to see what this ceremony really meant. Joseph Running Bear came last, leading a painted horse and carrying 4 eagle feathers. He was Ayanna's elder, uncle maybe, or something older than blood. He nodded to her, then to me. 4 feathers, he said. 4 generations. Your grandfather began it, you carry it. It must end here. I nodded, My throat was tight. My stomach rolled like the current behind him. Ayana stepped into the water first, barefoot, calm. She waded out slowly until the current reached her waist, then her chest, then she turned and faced me. "Count," Joseph said. "What?" I asked. "Count the seconds," he repeated. "If you break before the right moment, balance fails. If you wait too long—" He didn't finish. I looked at Ayana. She gave a single nod, then let the river take her. She vanished beneath the surface like a thread being pulled through. No splash, no fight. I began to count. 1, 2, 3. The town stood still. Joseph scattered the feathers into the wind. They spun like leaves, catching the rising light. 4, 5. No ripple, no hand. The river swallowed her whole. 8. I broke. I dove in, boots and all, lungs burning before I even hit the current. The water was cold as judgment. I searched blind, arms sweeping, legs kicking against rocks. My shoulder slammed into something, then arms. I found her, limp, drifting. I grabbed her waist, pulled her up. She wasn't breathing. I kicked toward the shore, my chest screamed. The river fought me, tried to pull us both back under. But I made it. I collapsed onto the bank, dragging her out beside me. Her face was pale, lips blue. "No," I gasped. "No, no." Joseph knelt beside her, pressed fingers to her chest, began a rhythmic push, chant low and steady. The water choked out of her throat in a single violent cough. She blinked, looked at me, then smiled. I broke into sobs, couldn't stop, didn't care who watched. Behind us, the townsfolk stood silent, not angry, not scared, just humbled. Joseph rose. Debt is balanced. The last feather, the smallest one, lifted on a breeze and spun into the river. Ayana sat up, breathing hard. Our eyes met. Something shifted. Not bound, not owed, just present. And for the first time since this all began, I felt the weight leave my chest. Ayana sat wrapped in a wool blanket near the fire Joseph had built. Steam rising from her soaked clothes, face flushed but alive. I sat across from her, boots still wet, shirt clinging to me like bark on a tree. The town stood scattered behind us, unsure if they should come closer or leave us in peace. Joseph stood, his voice carried over the river's hush. "This line is ended. The Delaney name owes no more. The river has accepted the exchange." Some nodded. A few crossed themselves. Henrik didn't move. "So what now?" he finally asked, arms folded. "She just stays?" Joseph's gaze turned to Ayana. "She chooses now. Not debt, not law, not fate. Choice." The weight of those words struck me harder than any storm. For weeks, she had followed, watched, kept to that impossible distance like a living law. I'd thought I was being haunted, tethered. But maybe she was deciding. Henrik stepped forward. "We want a promise she won't curse this place again." Joseph raised a brow. "She never cursed it. She warned it." I stood, heart hammering. "She's free. So am I. If she stays, it's not because she has to. It's because she wants to. Ayana stood too, the blanket falling around her shoulders like a cloak. She looked around, at the sky, the people, the water, and then at me. I have no place to go, but I have eyes, and I choose what I see now. Henrik looked ready to spit another insult, but Mrs. Patterson put a hand on his arm. Let it be. The dead are at rest. The river's quiet. That's all I care about. And just like that, the crowd began to leave, one by one. Some confused, others relieved, but all aware something sacred had passed between us this morning. I watched them fade down the trail. The only sound was the crackle of fire and the river's hum. You're free, I said to Ayana. You don't have to stay. She looked at me for a long moment. Then, neither do you. But here you are. I felt something crack open in my chest. It wasn't duty anymore. It was want. I want you near, I said, the words scraping out like splinters. Not because of a curse, not because of a name, because I've never known someone braver. She smiled. It was small, real. I'll be near, but no more watching from 30 feet, no more rules. No more rules, I repeated. And with that, she walked closer, one step at a time. No retreat, no hesitation. She sat beside me by the fire, close enough to feel the heat of her, close enough to know she was real. And for the first time, we were both exactly where we wanted to be. She stood beside me now. No measured distance, no invisible boundary keeping her 30 feet away. Just Ayana. Warm, alive, breathing the same air I did, and close enough to touch. We were back at the ranch a few days later. The barn door creaked like always. The chickens hadn't taken to her yet, but the horses had stopped flinching. That was progress. The townsfolk kept their distance. Henrik hadn't said a word to me since. Mrs. Patterson left a basket on my porch. Bread, jam, a note with only 2 words. I understand. Ayana didn't move into my house. She chose the hill above it, where the land curved gently and the view stretched all the way to the river bend. I want to see you, she said, her eyes bright, but not be chained to you. Good, I replied. I want the same. So she built a home up there, one beam at a time. Joseph helped her get lumber. I gave her my mother's hammer. It started as a lean-to, then grew walls, then a roof. Eventually, it looked like something halfway between a homestead and a prayer. She came down in the evenings, barefoot and smiling. She brought herbs, caught fish, carved spoons from driftwood. She told me stories I'd never heard, stories about how water remembers, and how some debts are older than names. I listened. I learned. She laughed more now. So did I. One morning, she walked right into my kitchen. No pause, no knock, just walked in like she'd always had the right. She sat at my table, looked me in the eyes. I had a dream, she said, of a house between 2 fires. One fire kept it warm. The other burned it down. I think this place, us, is the first kind. I couldn't speak. She leaned forward. I want to be near, Boon. By choice, not because a river told me to, because I tell me to. That was the moment I knew I loved her. Not because she needed me, because she didn't. I reached across the table and took her hand. I'd like that very much. Some days the wind still carries feathers across the porch. Some days the river hums louder than others. But the air feels right now. We live in parallel houses. She climbs down, I hike up. Sometimes we meet in the field where 30 feet used to stretch like an iron chain. Now, there's no need to count steps. We meet where we choose. Close enough to feel, free enough to leave. But we don't. Because love, when it's real, doesn't pull you under. It lets you breathe.